All right, let's jump in right on time. Thank you for taking the time out this evening for our August 2017 Capital Growth Masterclass. I'm really excited to take you through tonight's content. For those of you who have joined me before for a Ripe House Capital Growth webcast, I do apologize. There is going to be about 30 or 40% of content that I just need to go through once again to set a baseline for those of you who haven't attended before. We do things very differently here at Ripe House. We open the hood up and show you the how and the why, break things down, hopefully in a very logical fashion to try and help us reliably find and target capital growth, not just for August, but for any month, and then potentially position ourselves just ahead of the masses. So you'll see a quite sophisticated methodology tonight. I will try and break it down into bite-sized chunks for you, but it is designed for the expert or ambitious property investor really looking at taking their investing careers to the next level. Okay, there will be some good 101 type material. I do try and, you know, what I'm speaking of is not generally rocket science, but it's very logical. It's by behavior based. It hopefully makes sense, but it is definitely a lot of parts. We do pride ourselves on a lot of parts of tonight, and obviously Ripe House and the work that we do being quite unique. Okay, so I hope you get something out of the content this evening. Please take notes. Please ask questions. We do try and keep these sessions very dynamic, back and forth. If you do have a question, please raise your hand. Use the chat bar or the question bar on the right-hand side of your screen at any time. If it is relevant to the slide that I'm going through or the point that I'm making, I will stop and actually answer it there and then. Otherwise, we will be answering questions together as a group at the end of the session. There will be a recording coming through. Look out for that tomorrow morning. Sorry. But please, I really would encourage you to really get involved. We are happy to really take a deep dive into your particular circumstance or strategy at any time. I find that we all get the best and most out of these sessions if we do keep it nice and dynamic. If you do have any quality video, audio issues, we do have live chat currently enabled on the site, and we're all on standby to assist in that. So that's the live chat bar on the ripehouse.com.au website. We are on hand to support if you are having any issues. But once again, let's jump right in. I am going to try and get through things in about 45 minutes tonight, a huge amount to get through. Wish me good luck. I do hope it's going to be engaging and a lot of really nice takeaways for you. Then usually about 15 minutes question and answer. Just check that we're all online, all ready to go. I did do a quick sound check before we did get started. Please, while I'm actually telling you a little bit about myself right now, I might take a 1 or 2 minutes just to do that and introduce myself. If you would allow me to do so, that would be much appreciated. But at the same time, I would also love to just hear a little bit about you guys on the line. There's lots of you who have arrived nice and early and on time tonight. It'd be great just to hear who you are, where you've come from, where you're tuning in from tonight, maybe how many properties you potentially own, or if you're looking to buy your first one, it'd be great to talk and hear from you as you hear my story. So I've been investing for it's over 15 years now, back into the early 2000s. I was still at uni, or just started uni, and I bought my first property down here in Tasmania. So I'm from Tasmania. It's obviously quite remote to the rest of the country, but we still invest in property down here, and I did get started very early. Okay, so I bought my first property for $145,000 in Hobart. It's about 5 minutes walk, about a kilometre from the CBD. I did a quick renovation on that and lived in it for a short time. And then rented it out for $240 a week. I did that was a really nice result for me. It was cash flow positive from the first moment. The market was moving very quickly at that time. I was able to buy another property soon after, and rinse repeat was the idea. So I didn't just dive into property. I was learning and quite ambitious, I suppose, at a young age. I had saved up a deposit. I was able to buy a share parcel of Telstra shares, and didn't really go that well for me when first announced. And I thought there must be something else out there that might suit me a little bit, more personally. But then obviously allow me to leverage and start with my small base. At the time, I was actually living at home, and my dad was on the pension. We didn't have a huge amount of money, but I had saved up this chunk. I was looking at buying a property, which actually would have been an amazing investment, would have done very well. About a year before, I bought my first property for $80,000, very similar to one I actually purchased for almost double. But I didn't buy it, and funnily, my dad taught me out of it, or in some ways, told me debt is bad and be afraid of debt, and you don't want to get into debt. So I ended up buying a sports car with the money from Japan. I couldn't work out how to insure it once I got it home because it was so expensive. So I ended up selling that quite quickly. And after that funny false start, I went back into property. I guess I probably was guided towards property via Summersoft as a property forum, going right back into the early days, 2001, 2002. Jan Summers and her books really opened my eyes up to the whole concept of leverage and using other people's money to help buy a property, and then using that property to get into another. And therefore, I was now 100% focused. I wanted to buy a property. After those few purchases, I ended up meeting my beautiful wife Anna, and we moved to Sydney for professional reasons, and we wanted to continue to buy properties. Okay, so this was a completely foreign land for me. I didn't know how to understand value. I'd become at that point a bit of an expert in the Hobart area, and knew how to invest, and I knew a little bit about property and was quite experienced. Moving to Sydney was a completely different kettle of fish. I joined up with some buddies from Summersoft Forum. We went looking at properties out in the Mount Druitt area, and I really couldn't assess value. I was sort of completely bewildered. What was a very good property on the internet, and I'd done my research. I arrived at the property, and actually at the open home there was the locals using the actual property as a thoroughfare. They'd broken down the back fence. They were using to get from the public housing area, which obviously is what it is. It has some great social benefits, but for us property investors sometimes has a little bit of a negative effect. They were walking between their residents, breaking down the back fence of this property in question. It was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and walking through it to get to the local train station. That obviously caused a lot of issues with this property. It was cheap for a reason. I came back and took and thought, wow, what am I not understanding about this market? I sort of got rattled, I suppose, slightly, and wanted to come back and take stock. For me, that was a process where I didn't like the way that I felt. I didn't understand. So my wife and I, we ended up pulling back, didn't buy a property for another 18, 24 months. We went to a different suburb every weekend, sometimes even in between the weekends, for coffee, breakfast, lunch, trying to understand why people live there. And that's a whole of Sydney and Greater Sydney area. We did that. So I understood what made areas tick, and I understood a remote market that I wasn't really familiar with by that process. I taught myself a framework. I've always been sort of data and analysis orientated to assess these areas and compare and appraise or assess value. Okay, what is the value proposition? What are people willing to pay in these markets? We obviously ended up buying again. Now we own a portfolio across the country. I have then gone on and continued to evolve that framework from basic spreadsheets to now. We formed Ripe House in 2011. And it has built into a community with very advanced research tools, many of which are very unique and very useful, very powerful, but it did start off helping me and then a smaller group of investors, and now it's grown into what it is today. Okay, so that's a little bit of a story and a back history of where I've come from. As I mentioned, I'd love to hear a little bit about you guys. Sharon's mentioned she lives in Melbourne, has 3 houses. Bruce lives in Northern Territory. It must be nice and warm up there, not compared to us down here in Tassie, Bruce. Bruce, you're looking to buy your first property. Might be a good question. Are you looking in the Northern Territory for that? It'd be interesting to see if you are looking out across the country. Emma's down the list here. I'm tipping quite a few. Hugh, Emma, Linda, Aidan, Peter. Nice to see you online. Another one from Northern Territory. Emma, running a business here with my fiance. We're getting ready to now set up a strategy and get into property investing. Good luck, and nice to hear others starting on the journey. It's an exciting journey at that. Aidan's in Brisbane with 2 houses. Nice one, Aidan. Alex from, I can't see the character there you've got there, Alex. It's a funny encoding on the character. I can't actually see it. Paul is in Sydney, properties in Brisbane and Canberra. Nice to have you on the line, Paul. I better get back into it. A few more coming through. Keep the stories coming, guys. I can give a bit of a wrap up, but I might keep things moving because I do apologise. My story ended up, I got into a little bit of details there and carried away. So I do get quite passionate. Please tell me to slow down if I'm rushing, because I do get into talking about property and research and what's happening in today's market. So let's jump right in, okay? What I'm going to take you through tonight, with real-life examples, obviously, in application to August, is a system, and I call it a system because it's got multiple components that have to work and function together to amplify the results in each part of that system to achieve some pretty amazing things. I'm going to go through some case studies and some real-life examples of people using Ripehouse, but more so the concepts within to generate amazing growth stories. We're not talking about potentially buying and holding for 25 to 30 years in a tightly held suburb and having low yields, but overall good growth over a longer period. We are looking at finding properties that grow substantially from day one. For the first 12 months, really strong above average growth with really strong yields to support. In some cases, over 25% growth, some Ripehouse investors have been able to achieve reliably for their first 10 purchases using the system, and I can show you that in great detail. The whole job of this system is to start with the catchment area. We've got to look across the country for the most optimum area to focus in for today, not for 6 months in the future or 6 months in the past. Get the LGA right, find the absolute pinnacle of that LGA, the number one suburb driving it forward, not the laggards. The individual streets, the sweet spots we call them, that people are drawn towards and are paying more to live in and will continue to pay more. The exact properties that they want to live in, and then we have to be able to negotiate and buy effectively. So I'll talk a little bit around some strategies on that as well. Okay, before we get started, that's a pretty big, I suppose, deal really. It's a pretty big system and call to make. This system that we could rinse, repeat, reliably implement for targeting and purchasing very strong growth properties. How much would this system be worth to you if you could open it up and use over and over again? These are some numbers here, which we might be used to seeing in the industry. Might be education courses, it might be buyer's agent fees. It might even be larger fees that might be built into an off-the-plan property. We are potentially not interested in paying those every time we buy, or even once. But I'm going to ask you, what would this system be worth to you? Are these numbers more realistic or appropriate? Just checking once again if we've got any questions coming through. I do like to check and make sure that if, as I mentioned, anything is relevant, I'll stop and answer. First part of this system, the puzzle piece number one, is increase your catchment area of interest. So what do I mean by that? And I might skip through the points here and just clarify things, maybe with a little bit of a story, in terms of you all obviously live and are local, what I call them local area experts. So probably as an owner-occupier, but the area that you live in now, you know very well. You know why people generally like to live there, the strengths and the weaknesses. You know a little bit about them and what they might do and what they might do for a job. You know if they've got kids, or usually they might be university students or retirees, right? You are an expert in your local area. You also know potentially the streets in your suburb that are really booming at the moment, that are going ahead leaps and bounds, and you also know the areas to avoid. So if a family member comes and goes, I want to live in your suburb, and you would say, stay away from here. You're a local area expert. We have to develop this comfort level for the areas that we're looking at investing in. Because if we limit ourselves to just investing in our local area where we're comfortable, we might do very well for a certain period of time, but then we might have long stretches where we're not doing so well. And it's not much chance that at the time we're ready to buy, our local area is the best and most optimum place to buy across the whole country. Very little chance, in fact. So first thing we need to do, We need to open up the whole country and potentially invest anywhere for the greatest returns for today. If that's in Northern Territory, Queensland, Western Australia, Tasmania, it doesn't matter. We have to be able to assess the whole country, increase our catchment area of interest, get that comfort level so we can potentially put ourselves in markets set to perform from day one. We can do that by improving our research, our tools, and I suppose our acquisition process to be able to make decisions and act. How do we do this? So we don't do it by taking the bulk or mass generalized approach of comparing states versus states. That is too general. It's not enough to say New South Wales is in a slowdown phase because of Sydney, because there's rural that's going in a peak or uplift part of the cycle. Property clock going from 1 o'clock or midnight at the top at a peak down to 6 p.m. at a market slowdown or trough, and then it builds up through 8, 9, 10 o'clock as the growth phase of a cycle. As a state, we can't take the shortcut and go, right, New South Wales looks to be in a slowdown, I might stay away from there, and that's a generalisation. Tasmania seems to be, it's on a lot of people's, it's spoken of a lot at the moment around growth and what's happening down here. Well, there's obviously parts of Tasmania that are not doing too well at the moment. So when you're looking at a state level, it's a generalisation. It's actually an average of the different areas in that suburb. It might be Brisbane, southeast Queensland generally, coastal and regional, all pulling in different directions and giving you an average which doesn't allow you to make smart decisions. So mass media love these generalisations. Even looking at a city like Sydney, it still has 600 markets within it, 600 different suburbs, each doing different things. It's still too general to say that Sydney is slowing down. There's no opportunity there. So that's not our shortcut. I generally suggest looking at the local government area. We want to take a deeper dive into the individual local government areas across the country, 550 plus local government areas. They are a great, they generally show what is happening in that market very nicely. We have enough suburbs in them to group together to be able to make decisions based on, but not too many suburbs that it becomes a generalisation. Okay, this is probably a little bit irrelevant. I've sort of skipped my points a little bit around here, but I just wanted to make the point that when we're looking and increasing our catchment area and trying to invest across the whole country, it is critically important that whatever method we choose, it is looking at live information. And more to that, if we're looking at live information, but it takes us 3 months to collate all of this information and make our decision, then we are not able to make timely decisions. And we might select a market, but the actual buying window for that market was 3 months previous, and we are now coming up against mass media, lower sophisticated investors, bigger buying pools, buying, and we've missed our buying window. So in increasing your area of interest to the whole country, we have still got to hold the importance of live data front and center, okay? If you're relying on a research report, and I will question all your sources of information, it's critically important. If you're relying on a research report, that research report might be quarterly, as an example, okay? That research provider may purchase that data from a secondary source. It might take 2, 3, 4 weeks for that secondary source to gather it together, perform a report, and send it to the primary source of that research report. It might then take 2, 3, 4 weeks to gather up and do some subjective analysis, add another couple of layers internally, ring around and fact check. You're now running at 4, 6, 8 weeks after the event when the previous quarter of last year got closed and the data got as a snapshot. It might then take another week or so to generate the report and put it into your hands, and now we're finding ourselves 8, 9, 10 weeks behind when the last data extraction occurred, okay? And obviously in 2 weeks' time, the next quarter is beginning, and we're making our decisions based on previous data. You have to question this. If it's taking 6 months to do your own research and compare LGAs from LGAs, you might be able to make a decision, and it might have been a good decision 6 months before, but at the moment, or the time you're able to purchase, it might be the wrong decision, or potentially not the optimum decision. We're really looking at eking out every piece of opportunity, and to do that, the timeliness of information, the time it takes you to gather this, or the research source that you're taking from, to gather this together, it provides you more power and opportunity. Okay. Hopefully that didn't confuse. I will jump into some real-life examples in a moment. Before I go into this slide, I might just do that. So I will be referring back to Ripehouse as a research tool tonight to make examples, and this is one now to demonstrate the software and how it works. But there's obviously going to be a lot of takeaways that you can take with you tonight, as I've just sort of spoken about, some concepts and some, some strategies. These are what we can take away, but the real-life application of it is within the software. So this is the home page. I am a logged-in user, so I do have the dashboard link in the top right-hand side of the page. We've just recently made some nice improvements to this page and simplified it. We are able to actually access directly from our friends over at API Magazine the API content feed, which is filtered with more research and technology-based articles to come. You're able to see the API direct link into their news feed. We have a learning and FAQ center, which you can view as a logged-in user. We have 5 layers of research. I might just click on the state-by-state research to begin with. State-by-state, LGA versus LGA, finding that LGA at the about to move, about to grow. Suburb versus suburb is the 3rd layer. Then once we're in a suburb, how do you find the exact streets set to drive growth forward and the individual properties within? And we have some really cool advanced suburb research tools. We also release monthly reports, okay? Our current August edition, so every month it's updated on the 1st of the month, ongoing, as of now, 1st of the month, and dropped in to this position. You never have to go searching for it. It's in the same spot every month. It continues to roll and update. I'll click on that and get that loading in a new tab as well. That's a 53-page PDF document at the moment. It's a few megabytes that just downloads in the background. What that research report is actually a good example of how we do things here at Ripehouse. That's a monthly report. It takes about 2 or 3 days for myself and our team to vet our research and collate it into a written form for you. That's 3 days compared to potentially 10 weeks. It needs to be monthly because things change. Usually 8 out of the 10 or 12 suburbs within that report are the same, but they're always changing. One might be dropping out whilst another is coming into that report. Okay, that is our Bible, I suppose, internally, that we all refer to as our best picks as such. Having said that, there are about 10 times more picks that are at a similar level as the report that might be more relevant to you. We have to pick and choose a lot of varied types of suburbs to construct and add to the report. So your goal might be using the actual tools themselves. Obviously, we've got a lot of administration tasks or areas within the dashboard. Let's go into the state versus state first. This page has just been loaded in the background. You can load it here at the top. The reason why it did take about 15 seconds to load, which is quite a long time for a page, is because you might notice this heartbeat sign here. Ripehouse owns all of our own data. That gives us a huge amount of power, okay? Because we own this data, we are constantly refining, improving it, monitoring it. 3 times a day, we are going in and recalculating street, suburb, LGA, and state level information. Okay, so when this page is actually loading, it's going in and looking at things today. It is live. So therefore, it's looking at a huge amount of data when you load it, and you go down to an LGA and it's significantly faster. But this is a great demonstration of that power. The information you see here is live as of today. It's telling us that South Australia is in the growth and recovery phase. Tasmania a little bit more mature. As a state, New South Wales is at the market peak and coming up to it. That might mean, as mentioned before, state level is far too general. It might mean that Sydney is probably over the peak and in the slowdown phase, but regionals are still in the recovery and growth phase. So as an average, just before 12 o'clock. You can see some really key data for the for the states here. Why don't we click on a link? This is going to then load up our LGA versus LGA research tool, okay? This is now going to compare every LGA in the state that we clicked on, or you can do the whole country if you like, and compare every LGA in the country with very rich data sets, okay? We make things easy for you because It's one thing just to look at the raw data. Ripehouse is all about predictions and the trend or likely trend of each of these markets. Okay, so for each LGA, as you load the page, once again it's live in the top here, it's recalculating the the LGA property clock information for the LGA. It's recalculating ticks and crosses based on sales volume health, sales trend, days on market health, yield and trend internally. These are our measures that are quite sophisticated, but the more ticks generally, the more healthy the market's set for imminent growth. So we might be quite lost in this big list of LGAs. I usually come in and filter things between 7 and 10 o'clock on the property clock, that entering the growth phase and still having a nice amount of upswing. And then I'll set myself at 3 out of 6 as the minimum. So 3, 4 or more is a nice healthy market that is in the growth phase, okay? And that brings our list down to a far more manageable number of suburbs. We've got some familiar names there. Our next job after this, once we've filtered down and found some target LGAs, obviously you'll be doing this across the whole country, is clicking on an LGA, and now our job is to find the #1 suburb, okay? I might put pause on the demo there for a small moment. I will skip back over to the slides. What I just wanted to probably mention is markets, as an LGA or a suburb, right, I generally treat them as a combination within themselves. It might not do things, it might be quite stagnant for a long period of time, 6, 8 years. Obviously, property market cycles are sometimes quite unreliable, not something that's quite defined. We do have property clocks, etc. But each market typically has different pushes and pulls. The cycles might be longer or shorter. Okay, but let's just have the assumption that a market is generally stagnant for quite a period of time, and then it has a very strong uplift, and then it will slow down and return to the status quo. Okay, so if we're holding an investment when it's not doing much, we're not growing that investment, we've got resources tied up into it. We potentially could reassign those resources to another property or asset. And the difference between the asset that's performing, the one that's not, that we currently hold, is lost opportunity. It's our opportunity cost. Okay, so we're buying the property earlier on in the cycle. It's developing a lot of opportunity cost there on the left. If we're buying in the red zone, which is our buying window, it's usually only 3 to 6 months where the market is showing imminent signs of growth. We can be quite sure of that imminent sign of growth, but it hasn't started to move yet. We position ourselves just before it. If we wait until the mass media kicks on, we might have already had 15% growth or 10% growth. We are following mass media or larger buying groups. Now spruiking Tasmania as the place to buy. Well, no, it was actually the time to buy in Tasmania when Ripehouse was recommending it. To be perfectly frank, 18 months ago, before the heat and before people were actually saying this is the place to buy, and the mass media were onto it. We've actually had 15% capital growth in the last 12 months. 24 months was the optimum buying window here in Hobart. If you wait for the masses, you potentially lose out on that initial upswing. But worst of all, you've lost the ability to be able to negotiate effectively, because you've got now maybe 4 or 5 offers on every property. You're not able to really assess value because the market's moving and you can't find that line in the sand of value, and you can't potentially negotiate and purchase under. So it's not just getting into markets before growth, but it's being able to really drive down and get a good deal and negotiate effectively in a market about to move. Okay, we want to beat the market masses and use them to deliver us our growth. Probably breaking this down really quickly, a typical buy, you might get 12% if you're lucky in the first year. You can see how it might be broken down. Typically, and I'm going to show case studies of this in a moment, using Ripehouse or the methodology within, you're really eking out the last bit of growth out of each of the layers that amplify together to form an outstanding investment and growth. And that includes being able to negotiate effectively and potentially purchase far under the market at the property level. Okay, a huge difference between the results you can potentially generate in the first year. Probably just a little clarify this. All this looks great with being able to talk about these numbers. This is a bit of an audit that we went through in terms of, we started as a research platform, obviously going since 2011, but started actually giving recommendations in 2015. Top 10 capital growth suburbs was given at the beginning of 2015, and since then, each suburb has had an average growth of 10.1%. Great. Let's move on to September. We'd actually evolved our recommendation engine at that point. In September, we were the cover story of Money magazine. In 2015, you can see the 133 best streets. We don't just tell you the suburbs, we tell you the exact streets within them. If you'd invested in the suburbs recommended, that would be 8.42% average. Okay. If you'd invested in the exact streets that Ripehouse recommended within that report, you would have achieved 14.9%. So you can start to see how we don't just give individual suburb recommendations. It has to be the street as well, which we don't leave you hanging there. It is that street, and this is the type of property to buy there. So next we continue on. The Pinpoint Predictions monthly reports then started in early February, 2016. Our first issue has achieved 13.9% average growth per suburb. Things are continuing to improve. 14.5% growth in the issue 6, and then up to October of last year, average growth is now, at that time, 18.7%. Okay, now we don't really have enough time to gather reliable per annum growth because of it's only been sort of 6 or 9 months. So that would be the last reliable capture moment. That is our average growth figures for a suburb, street, and property combination recommendation, okay? You can use all of the tools I'm showing you tonight and the methodologies within to be able to rinse, repeat. Our next job, once we've found the LGA, is finding the exact suburbs. It might be only 1, 2, or 3 within the LGA set for imminent growth. Even the LGA itself is at a point in the property clock. It's still going to have suburbs that are not doing anything, might be going backwards, and it's got other suburbs that are really driving forward. We want to find those suburbs, okay? We want to beat the masses into them, and we want to use those masses to give us the outstanding growth. And we want to be potentially targeting suburbs that have been lying dormant. Then the stars have aligned, and they are set for imminent growth from the day 1 of purchase, not 6 months after. Okay, an actual example before I go over to how we find these suburbs. Guy Williams is a Ripehouse investor. He has purchased 10 properties in the first 10 months of his subscription. The average annualized capital growth of each of those properties is 25%, 105% cash-on-cash growth, and the average yield across those 10 properties was 6.25%. So you can read about Guy's story on API magazine. We actually had a summary of that a few weeks ago on behalf of the content over there. And we also have our own blog and content portal, which is the frontierinvestor.com.au. So we've actually got 4-piece case study of Guy's story. You can break down the properties he purchased, why, hence, and his strategy. And then also the service providers, how he interviews, how he finds property managers for these properties remotely. A lot of the deep dive stuff that's really useful. He has done amazing things with Ripehouse and continues to do so. I might just go really quickly into, this is probably still more note-taking, how we find these suburbs set for imminent growth. I mentioned before we look for the stars aligning, okay, and this is a little bit of a hint because let's just work back at an LGA level why things go in the right direction. You might see a train line announcement, you might see major public infrastructure spends, a mine or whatever it may be, or you might see a tunnel being built in the middle of Sydney. Whatever the major project is or the combination of lots of smaller projects, I don't really care what they are. I don't care when they're announced or when they're going to be completed. I'm actually looking for the cause, I'm looking for the effect, okay? I'm looking at when those things are leading to increases in demand. So I don't necessarily care what they're doing, I'm looking for the net result from them. It might be an IKEA, it might be a shopping centre, a train line, a business park, a university, it might be a marina, whatever it might be, okay? All of these things being built, when they start increasing demand to live in the area, the first thing you generally see is rents increasing. People want to move to an area for the first time. They will usually rent first. They'll dip their toe in the water. So the first thing you see is not all the media stories, etc. We're getting in before all of that. We're seeing rents starting to spike, okay? Uplifts in rent, it happens very quickly. We then see yields going up in line with the rent. So if rents are going up and properties have already started to move, we won't have yields increasing at the same time, but if rents and yields are increasing increasing at the same time, it's a very powerful buying signal. Okay, then we potentially look 6 months after the fact. Those people who are buying and renting and living in the area, they're loving it. Their job's going well. I'm going to buy. Sales volume starts spiking. Okay, there may be some very opportunistic developers already in the market, so sales volumes might be increasing. If days on market are steady or decreasing, it means there's a stock tightening. Demand is outpacing supply. We've had all of these nice predictive measures of growth. We actually have over 120 metrics that we analyse in different combinations at different times to give our recommendations within Ripehouse. This is a very simple example about how the stars can align to predict imminent growth. Okay, this is when growth at this really basic level is likely to occur. All right, let's go in. How do we find individual suburbs in these LGAs? Well, you notice I did click on that suburb on the LGA. I've now got into each suburb within the LGA. I won't go into this page too much, but basically the bigger the greener the shape, the more bullish we are on the predictive metric health. We've got strong opinion from experts in the industry. We've got a very strong and resilient income, which is rent in the market with low vacancies. And we've got very strong investability. So we've got lots of properties that are in demand in the key streets in the suburb. You can see based on the shape, you know, this shape here, as an example, might have good metric health, but you can't buy any properties there. This one has obviously no or very low metric health and no properties you can really buy here. The interest score, by the way, is our internal score. So Ripehouse users, how many Ripehouse users are interested in this suburb? So sometimes you might wait for a suburb that has great metric score. Lots of experts are now talking about it. The word is probably out. And you need to wait for a lot of other investors to buy there. So you have that comfort. Or you might be really wanting to get out there first where you get into a market where the metrics health is off the scale, but no one's really in there yet. Okay, if you are not really interested in the LGA, you just want to find the biggest and best shapes, you can actually click on one of our defined strategies on the left-hand side. This is now looking out across the whole country and finding the biggest, strongest shapes. These are what we call undercover, strong metric score, low opinion, so the word isn't out there yet. Experts are not talking about it, but the data is amazing. These are our real diamonds in the rough, okay? And the interest hasn't started to build yet, but there sometimes is a nice security blanket of investors looking there. These are the really nice shapes. You can see some here through Queensland, Ballarat, around the country. If you wait for things to become a boomerang, I'll just explain that now. You can see the undercover shape there like a tick. You can see boomerangs are when the experts have caught on. That might be 3 months after. And then the big greens are when the investors have now caught on and it becomes a big green, okay? There's no right or wrong. If you want to put yourself out on a ledge a little bit more, you can go for an undercover. If you want to wait for some more experts to come along in the national media and the national consciousness to talk about, we're monitoring media sentiment and building that into our algorithm. If you might want to wait for a little bit more of that, then you can, and then that turns into a boomerang and the shape changes. Let's click one of these. I was actually going to use, Waratala as our area of interest. It's up here near Warana, so I can use that as well. Let's click on Warana, because now we've isolated a suburb. Any of those could have been chosen. Waratala is actually in our pinpoint predictions report. I've just loaded that up in the background as well. This month's edition's 53 pages. It's not actually in best to worst. It's all of these 10 suburbs are at the same tier. They're all extracted from our data sets. The first, you can see, there's about 5 or 6 pages on each suburb. You can see a lot of information about the streets, the traditional rolling. Sorry, I just had a frog in my throat. The rolling data for the suburb, you can get down to the individual streets to target and the individual recommendations that we are making to buy, the types of properties, where, when, and how much to pay. It's all in our report, okay? We've gotten through into the area. There's obviously a few suburbs similar and around. Waratala, Warana, they're all doing similar things for similar reasons. I could have picked them both out of that Explore the Nation page. We've now loaded the suburb up into our street level analysis tool. This is incredibly powerful, incredibly unique. This is how we become local area experts in these suburbs that we've never visited before, and potentially negotiate and purchase remotely, never having inspected. We've got a lot of information and resources about how to gain comfort in doing that. But once we find Rotella, let's now try and find the individual streets within Set for Growth. So I'll just skip through this. I have covered it. We're turning the screws here. This is how we eke out those extra few percent. If the suburb goes up 6% a year, if we get the street right, we can sometimes, have a significantly better result. It's all about getting the local area perspective right, and you can see how important that is. This is, in numbers, how important is it? Right. We have a thing at Ripe House called the Ripe House Sweet Spot, okay? We've monitored and tracked data, and we've looked at different combinations of things that, if they exist at a street level, result in strong and significantly stronger capital growth. Those things, I'll tell you what they are in a moment. 5 of them that, when combined together, result in an average of 21.9% above average returns compared to the suburb overall. So if the suburb goes up 4%, you can expect, if you get the sweet spot right, the Ripe House sweet spot, you can achieve about 5% growth, okay, in the same period. And that's obviously an average across the country. For those of you in Sydney or own property there, over the next 10 years, that's potentially another $240,000 in your pocket, okay? Sorry, I talk a little bit fast in this section. It's quite exciting for me because this is internal. This is something we do very well and differently. The Ripe House sweet spot, there needs to be under 15% public housing in the street. We've done a lot of research. The more public housing, the more volatility there is in that street, and potentially the lower growth as an average, okay? There also needs to be lots of the in-demand property type, 3-bedroom houses if that's what people are wanting, and strong tenant demand, okay? Higher than average rent, higher than average yield, and above or strong tenant demand. When they combine, it's usually only about 10 to 15% of each suburb. That is a Ripe House sweet spot. Some suburbs have quite a few. Some suburbs don't have any. They don't have the right combination, okay? Very important to get this right. We've also do a lot of research and build into our appraisals and also our growth recommendations the distance away to the big 3 amenities to each property. We've done a lot of research, cafes, schools, shops, hospitals, doctor surgeries, parks, whatever they may be. These are the big 3 that have a significant, or really a correlation to value and growth. The others might sound sophisticated and potential to impact growth, but in reality, as investors, we're targeting investment grade properties. These are the big 3 that add to value, allow us to charge more rent and increase that in a higher proportional rate, and therefore impact growth. Okay, you can see here how being right on the doorstep to schools is okay, but being 250 metres away is the prime position. Out to about 1,400 metres to the closest shopping centre, and at about 1 kilometre away from the key transport hub is Optimum. Public housing, expect to pay 25% more than the suburb average if there's 0% public housing in the street, and 18% or more public housing in the street results in 20% less value expectation. Huge volatility based on the level of public housing in the street. Things that we might never have actually even thought of, okay? How do we find those? On every suburb across the country, you can load it up in the suburb analysis page. You can see exactly where the public housing is here. Although it's got only 2% in the suburb, this particular street here has 6%. Remember, we want under 15% to qualify for a sweet spot. We know potentially the areas to avoid. We know where the green owner-occupiers are living, the yellow tenants are preferring to live. We know where there's lots of units. They're in the middle in the yellow, and the houses surround it. We can see where the stronger prices are along the water. Surprise, surprise. The higher renting and yield where available. It needs to be a larger sample size to do that. It only looks at what's happening in the market at the moment, which is the last 3 months. Let's have a look at the Ripe House sweet spots for the suburb. It will automatically show you where they are. You can come down and it will automatically toggle the tolerances for that sweet spot and apply that to the map. Now, these orange areas are Ripe House sweet spots. We only really want to buy and invest there in preference, because this is traditionally the data has shown the might, or more likely to be, the more high performing areas. Okay, we can see current for rent properties in the suburb. We can see current sold properties over the last 3 years in the suburb as blue dots. You can view the information for those sales, obviously. we can view the suburb report. It's telling us that 3-bedroom houses are most common and in demand. That's what we want to buy. Obviously, we've got 38 properties currently on the market. We don't want to go through those individually. I'm going to filter. I only want to see houses that are located in our orange sweet spot areas, and we only want to see 3-bedroom houses. Okay, this is zooming right in onto the absolute core, the pinnacle. Number 1 on the list, it is ordered by price, low to high. Number 1 is 78 Paringa Street. It's been on the market for 44 days. You can see this really nice green bubble over on the right-hand side, which is telling us the property's actually been discounted by 8% over those 44 days. You can see images, basic details. You can see that our algorithms have assessed it as in good condition. You can override that if you like. You can see it hit the market 5th of July for 489, and it's now at 449. You can see the original listing for that. You can see some great suburb and area level information. What we're trying to do now is use all the information we have at our disposal to make sure that the comparables used to form an appraisal for the property are accurate and are actual comparable properties. We can see one here is potentially too high. We're going to remove and replace that. Once you're actually happy with that process, you can use this engine to do a formal or a full appraisal of the property using comparables. You can see the images for the sale, etc. It will gather those together and form a base valuation of 390. Take the time to do that comparable analysis because we want to be using those comparables to negotiate and question the agent's demonstration of value. Okay? It's also a little bit too far away from schools, a good distance from shops, and public housing is low, so you can see how all of that affects the appraisal. I probably didn't take the time there to do a manual appraisal, so we might be a little bit off there on the asking price versus the appraisal, but it will give you estimates for the estimated rent and yield. Hope that makes sense. A lot to take in. You can see how we've gone from the state to the LGA, local government area, into the suburb, into the street, into the property, and we've pinpointed the exact property to target in this market. Obviously, this might not suit us, so we go and we join up 3 or 4 other suburbs together, and we might get 1 or 2 of the most premium opportunities in each, and that will give us enough to actually start making some calls. We want a few options. Okay, we want to be using the information available to us to negotiate like a pro, especially when it's in a remote market. But remember, the key is to get in before the market masses and potentially have a number of properties we can make offers on before there's lots of other investors competing against us. Okay, I might just jump through really quickly. If you are looking for amazing growth, which I know you are taking the time out, obviously on a Thursday night, 8 o'clock, to learn about property investment, which for a lot of people might be a boring or pretty dry subject. So you're obviously looking for, making things a little bit easier for yourselves in the future, and that generally involves properties that perform. And in this case, is doing amazing things, amazing growth. Okay, Lauren is a story that is a Ripe House user that I love to refer back to. It's a really nice and amazing story, and Lauren's done some really good things since she started with Ripe House. But just generally, she had actually found out about Ripe House while she was attending a property seminar, an education seminar. And the person sitting next to her told her in one of the breaks, I use Ripe House and, it might be worth and work for you. Because Lauren had been to multiple seminars over a period of 18 months, okay? She was really keen and really wanted to buy a property. She had a deposit ready, that wasn't a problem. But she couldn't get over that hump and gain the confidence to purchase. And this is something I see in terms of just think about it logically, I suppose. You've been to one seminar which teaches one methodology, and you go to a second which teaches another, and they might conflict, and that generates what we call, I suppose, or I call in the industry, analysis paralysis, okay? You've got conflicting messages, you haven't done it before, what do I do, which is right, what's wrong? And that generally then creates an anxiety, and it builds up over 18 months, in Lauren's case, sometimes more. What that's done now, you haven't purchased for that period of time. So this is building up a huge amount of stress or reliance on that next purchase to really shoot the stars out. So I usually see this. I usually see investors gravitating to more advanced strategies as their first purchase because they've really got to shoot the lights out for that first purchase. They've got to do a renovate and big, structural build, or they might even put a granny flat on the back when they've never even purchased a property before because they have to generate returns that justify 2 years of this whole search and ordeal. In Lauren, she came to Ripe House and it made sense for her. She was on one of these calls about 2 years ago. It really made sense for her. She could see the logic and how it cut through. And she could see that if she gets a property, it doesn't need to be glamorous. It doesn't need to be a big price point. She doesn't need to do this big renovation on it. She needs to get growth and she needs to buy a property. And that was a bit of an aha moment. She was able to see the system, how it all fit together. It took Lauren 3 weeks, whilst after purchasing Ripe House and the subscription to Ripe House, to purchase her first property based on the software and the tools within. And so, it really allowed her to have an aha moment, as she described, and take definitive action and make a purchase. And that's the same for Guy. He's got now about 50 properties in his portfolio. We might have to get him on again. He's been on a few times and touch base with how he's going. But you can use it to rinse, repeat, or get that first property into your portfolio. Just before we go on, I'm going to jump into the question and answer session. I have gone about 10 or 5 minutes over time from where I'd like to be. I just wanted to once again say a big thank you. If you've made it this far, you're obviously, I'm not going to be a bit corny, but you're pretty excited about property, like I am, and you're also pretty excited about taking a charge towards properties that grow and deliver amazing results to you and your family. We've all got goals, we've all got things we want to do, we all want to get forward and achieve those, and property is a great mechanism to do it. So based on this fact, I feel that Ripe House is a perfect fit for you and other DIY property investors looking at taking charge and moving forward. Now, for those of you that don't know, Ripe House is a subscription service. It is only available by Ripe House annual subscriptions. The reason why we do that is because the recommendations are incredibly valuable. There's a huge amount of expense and resources that are combined together to be able to make very specific recommendations. Right down, as you saw before, the street and the property level, and I guess we ask for an annual commitment to join the community, be able to digest and discuss and digest the research material, but then also use the tools. So you might obviously not be purchasing every month, but you are then learning and getting confidence, engaging and digesting the research reports at a monthly stage. So then every single moment that you are able to purchase, you purchase that moment. And that requires an annual subscription. We don't offer monthlies because of the value of that recommendation. It is only available via an annual subscription. To that end, though, it is usually $1,597 per annum. As mentioned, you're on the line, you're very serious. I'd love to thank you for taking the time out and offer a $400 saving for tonight only for those of you who are on the line. Included in that, you have seen the research reports. This month edition is 53 pages of gold. It is our reference material. That's our best bits, I suppose. Normally, it's available for purchase for $97 per edition. We are including the 12 monthly editions in that fee of $1,197. So you can use that every month to digest, take in, and then implement over and over again. This deal, I suppose, or it's really, it's a thank you. It's a joining together of us who have all taken the time out and are excited about property to join together and move forward. But it is only available until 11 p.m. tonight. We've packaged this up for you, for everyone on the line, but it is only available for a short time. Okay. I might just probably make the point that a lot of other people in the industry use Ripe House. Okay, researchers, educators, other buyers agents in the industry, and also obviously a lot of investors. Okay, they have got some great things to say about Ripe House. I might skip over this. We are in the tax period, but Ripe House potentially, according to your particular circumstances, may be eligible for a tax deduction, but that is something you need to talk to your accountant about. We're in the tax doing season at the moment, not the tax preparation season. After the season. As mentioned, the way that you lock in this special thank you offer for tonight is by going across to www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. So I'd encourage you to do that. Jump across to that now, so you can, I can take you through filling in the details together, so we can If there's any questions about the process, I can get to them now while you're on the line. But once you're over on that page, go to the big red Get Started button. Click on that. It will pop up a details box for you to enter in your name, email, phone. Click on the green Subscribe button, which will then allow you to enter in your credit card details. So you can see here on the right that credit card process is done by Stripe. That is global. It's best practice. Your details are transmitted directly to them and never come to us. Okay, so they hold the security. Absolute best practice in payment revision. You will notice, because you've gone through the bonus page, this is very important, it will pre-fill a coupon code onto that page, okay, and that will enable the $400 offer. So make sure, you might need to tab through that, make sure, you know, if it's not adding that to the subscribe amount, or reducing it, sorry, that it is enabled, it's coming through from the URL, and that $400 thank you is definitely applied to your purchase. Okay, I might put it on mute for a moment. Please bring all the questions that you've got, throw them at me now. I'll put the mute button on for a minute or two and gather questions, grab a cup of tea, come back. I'm happy to spend as much time as it takes to go through one question at a time. If you don't want to stick around, I'd love to hear your feedback. Please get in touch via the chat bar here. Let me know what you thought of tonight. But I really do thank you for your time. If you don't want to stick around, until next time, thank you. Okay, I've got lots of questions coming in. Please keep them coming. I'll start working down them in chronological order. I've got a big smile on my face. Thank you, Gail, for your kind words. It's really nice to hear. Yeah, you've had a good result, and lots of you have sort of thanked for the content. Hopefully, you're sticking around. Gail has mentioned. I would like to send a huge shout out to Jacob and Ripe House. I'm reading this out because it's really put a smile on my face. But I've now bought a house, and I did so much research, and Ripe House was outstanding in enabling me to come out of analysis paralysis and actually purchase on the Sunshine Coast. I'd love to ask which suburb you ended up purchasing in, Gail. Maybe even price point or budget if you're comfortable. Some amazing things happening on the Sunshine Coast at the moment with the hospital in and around the Warana area. That's causing a lot of heat, so there are some suburbs that we were recommending going back a year or two that we're not anymore because they do have a lot of heat. And the suburb, or LGA overall, is really pushing forward. And it is starting to become on the tips of a lot of investors' tongues and obviously media, but some really nice buying opportunities through that area. Gail actually also mentioned that she lives in Melbourne and was always confident in purchasing property around Melbourne, but buying interstate was a thought. Ripe House just reinforced for me how easy it was to leave my comfort zone and purchase. Gail, I looked all around Mooloolaba, so this has just come through. Warren, hopefully that's pronounced right, W-A-R-A, oh, you might probably mean it, Warana? Yep, Paria, and I brought in Mountain Creek. Beautiful. Really cool. Mountain Creek's a lot of nice 4-bedroom houses, lots of middle market demand, which is what we want. Close to Caloundra, really good spot. Nice one. I might go back up to the top. Aiden's just thanked. Yep, 4-bedroom house at auction. That might have been a little bit stressful. Okay, Darby has just questions come through. Why did the graph earlier show Victoria close to a trough? I might just probably clarify that. So when that graph and Victoria close to a trough, once again, I did make the point a few times in different ways, I suppose, that when we're looking at state-level property clock information in a trough, Victoria itself, you might have 1.5 million plus in Melbourne doing one thing, 3-bedroom houses doing another, and units under 500k doing a completely different thing. You might have inner ring regional satellites like Geelong and Ballarat, Bendigo, going in one direction, whilst you have coastal and regionals doing a completely another. Okay, all of these pushes and pulls in regional areas or regions of a state create an aggregate or an average that sometimes is way off. It's against our expectation of what we would expect. So just in summary, whilst Victoria itself says it's in a trough, that might mean that the bulk of Melbourne might be in the slowdown phase, and some of the regionals or Geelongs are in a boom phase, and as an average it's in a trough. So what that means is state level information is very general. I wouldn't rely on it. It's good for the media and the mass generalizations, but it doesn't really help us. We can drill down using the software. You can click on the state and see every LGA in that state and the individual LGA property clock information, which is far more relevant to us. Okay, going back right up to the top. Reese has mentioned, I didn't tell us about Lauren's amazing growth story. I actually have to touch base with Lauren, and I'll just check if she's on the line, which is a bit of a long shot, hopefully. No, no, can't see. Lauren, shout out if you are on the line. It'd be great to probably touch base again and get some updates. There's many hundreds of current subscribers and many thousands over the years. And yeah, it'll be lovely to touch base and once again check what's happening. Alex has mentioned thanks. It's a great tool. Leo has mentioned, what do you mean by monthly coaching? When I say that, Leo, we have regular monthly webcast events like this evening where I do take you through the tools, answer any questions, and then I also, that extends offline afterwards in terms of live chat, etc., and continuing to assist and help. But then we also have the research reports, which you're able to digest and integrate and help with your investment. So we are around, we have a lot of help and tutorial information, can answer questions, and then we have our monthly capital growth events, if that makes sense. And it all refers back to obviously the tools themselves and the research reports. Okay, so Christina, if you were given 500k to invest tomorrow, which area would you invest in and why? Look, that's a difficult, you know, I'm not going to say it's a difficult question. There's a lot of other parts to that question, but I generally, the Ripehouse software is very good for finding areas that are cash flow neutral and positive, and also about to experience really good growth. Okay, so they're usually going together. So I won't say and complicate this by saying, do you want a house or unit? Do you want to be in a particular state because of land tax issues, or do you want to have a minimum yield? I would say blanket $500,000. I'll probably be looking more towards the South Australian market. Okay. If you've got more than that to spend, I'll probably still be buying multiple there. I'm really quite bullish at a macro level, at a policy level. I don't like to get too much into the policy and commentary, but there's a lot of suburbs that are doing some really positive things within the research, and there's not a huge amount of heat within them. Okay. Lorraine's talking about what does price trend mean. So if currently price is 500,000 and in a year's time it goes up to 550,000, it's trended upwards 50,000 and therefore about 10% growth in that period. Okay, that's the trend. So we don't just look at a number. It's important to look at a number. It might be 500,000, but it's at a research or a recommendation, from a recommendation perspective, it's more the trend that we actually take away and rely upon. Linda, thank you for sharing your story and running through the Ripehouse methodology. My pleasure. Andy's also mentioned, how about the suburbs that were on your reports in the past, which have not gone up? Okay, as an average, each of the suburbs in those reports is around 15%. Some have, we were very early into the Geelong area, about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, into very particular pockets of low socioeconomic areas that have actually done amazing things. Like we've had buyers agents using our software who have purchased in bulk in these markets and had average, 20 to 30% growth. And I'm not just, those numbers are outstanding, but they have been that good as the absolute pinnacle, Andy, of growth in a short amount of time. And obviously, on the flip side, there are some suburbs in our reports that don't. It's an average. Okay, so they don't do that and achieve those numbers. As an average across 10 or 15, in some reports we have 17 or 18 recommendations or suburbs, we achieve 15%, and it's usually about an 80 to 90% hit rate. Okay, I haven't got the exact number in front of me, but it's usually about 8.5, 9%. 9 out of 10 of those suburbs will generate really strong or good growth, market or above, and there's an exception to the rule in some cases. I guess what we're trying to do, Andy, just to probably explain that, is when you wait for growth to occur and you use previous growth to indicate future growth, there's a conflict there. So the reasons and the mechanisms that were in place to generate growth in the past, that may be now priced into the new higher point. So people had more incomes, they wanted to pay more to live in the area, prices go up, and now that's met the equilibrium. So we can't particularly sometimes look at previous performance. We've got to look at the current state of the market to put ourselves in looking and predicting future growth. So there's no crystal balls. What we've done tonight is we've gone into a lot of detail about the whys and potentially the hows, but there's obviously no guarantees. Okay, we've still got to make our own decisions, and we've still got to take a recommendation and apply it and use other qualified financial advisors, etc., to help us with those decisions. But I hope that sort of probably illustrated your point a little bit. I guess, Andy, so what's gone wrong with some other suburbs? So probably a bit of that didn't go so well in the report, and this might sort of clarify things. So one thing that we do see, we might have 10 suburbs that look equally good on paper, but we can't predict things like someone purchasing in one of those suburbs, and 6 months down the track, a Stockland or a large developer, whoever it might be, it's just a random large developer will come in and they will saturate the market. They might do well for themselves and other people, but they're potentially adding a huge amount of supply into a market that we otherwise wouldn't have predicted, or couldn't, there was no other outside indications that they were. That's then changed the demand-supply scenario, and the growth hasn't occurred. We can't predict, or there was no outward signs of why that may have not have occurred. Hope that makes sense. That was just one reason, I suppose, of how things can change into the future. Linda has asked, when you say live data, where does the sales data come from? Okay, so we own all of our own internal data sets. We act like Google, and we go across the internet 3 times a day, sometimes more, and look at all sources of property information and bring it together in one place. So you might have seen that it has property listing data and history of that listing data. We are gathering that together from all sources and bring it to you. So we're only providing a service like Google. I suppose it's only the search result that is shown, and you have to go back to the original source to see the full details. Thanks, Andy. I hope that answer was, made sense. As you rightly said, there is no crystal ball. Thank you for the seminar, though, very informative. No worries, mate. Thank you. Do you personally buy into these areas that have not moved in price with your system, or you wait for the price movement first? So that's a good question. I guess it does appeal to you more as a person. So some investors like to wait until there's a lot of market momentum, and they don't mind missing out on that first 10% because they've seen the market move. They've got a little bit of confidence there. They don't potentially have enough or as much upside, but that suits them as a person. Okay, I am potentially put myself out on the ledge a little bit more, and I bias right towards, as someone as Christina mentioned before, where I personally invest 500,000. I would actually go right to South Australia, where I'm putting myself further into that undercover space, where there's not really as many experts or investors investing there, but I can come in and see a property that, based on my valuation indications, might be 350, and I can purchase it for 310 because it's been on the market for 190 days. I can negotiate very effectively. no other offers have been made, and I can really lowball multiple properties and purchase something under market in an area that is widely looking very positive for future growth. So that, for me, is a really nice combination. Emma's question there, what are my thoughts on the inner Brisbane market, max 10Ks from CBD? That probably follows on quite well, Emma, in terms of Brisbane market, inner city. You've got a lot of supply coming to the market, and a lot of people asking questions within Ripe House, why hasn't huge amounts of growth occurred within Brisbane? And we have been speaking of growth within the Brisbane area for 3 or 4 years within Ripe House and targeting suburbs directly within it. But you've got a lot of supply side risk, and you can't control that supply side risk. So as I sort of touched on before with Andy, I would prefer to buy in areas where you can control that risk a little bit more, that might not be as densely populated, satellite areas close to key amenities or train, where the lower density population, you're not going to have a developer coming and building townhouses or large apartment blocks, because it just doesn't support that in the area. Therefore, you're minimising the risk of that supply side risk and potentially still getting similar or good returns. Okay, Jennifer's just asking quite a subjective question there about using the software as a current user. I'm happy to stick around and answer that, but it might not bog everyone down in the details of how to adjust that toggle. I'll stay on the line though and obviously get onto that, Jennifer. Look, that's got through the whole list, so I'm just going to double check one more time if there's any other questions. I'm happy to stick around once the microphone's off and can answer things via chat. It'll be lovely to have you, anyone on board who's not already a subscriber. We're all about, as a DIY investor ourselves, helping other DIY investors. That's what Ripe House is here for. I hope you found tonight informative. I really do thank you for your time. I'd love your feedback, whether it's positive or any things we can improve upon. It'd be very useful. Until next time, happy investing and have a great night. Thank you.